Hi, Epic Recaps here, and today I am going to explain to you a 2013 psychological thriller titled Side Effects. If you want to be spoiled, keep watching. The movie begins inside an empty New York apartment, where a struggle has taken place, evidenced by a trail of bloody footprints. The next scene jumps back to 3 months earlier, and a woman named Emily Taylor is visiting her husband Martin, who is serving a 4-year prison sentence for insider trading. Some time has passed and Martin is set to be released that day. Emily arrives at the prison, along with his mother, to welcome him home. That night, the couple make love, although Emily doesn't seem really focused or attached to it. Afterward, Martin mentions a certain Marshall Hellman, whom he met in prison. He tells her he was doing time for tax fraud, but will soon be released, and offered Martin a job. He promises to make them rich again, and Emily responds with a non-committal okay, but once again, she doesn't look interested, or has any kind of emotional response. Leaving the apartment, a distracted Emily drops her bag on her way to the car. A garage attendant helps her out, and shortly after getting into the vehicle, she stops and stares at the concrete wall. Putting the car in drive, she proceeds to drive into the wall, in an apparent suicide. The scene changes to the local hospital where Jonathan Banks, a resident psychiatrist, tends to Emily, who has suffered minor head trauma from her suicide attempt. Jonathan is concerned for her safety, but she convinces him that she had a minor lapse in judgment, and promises to attend his therapy sessions if he releases her. Banks gives some instructions to Martin and his mother, and puts her on antidepressant medication, leaving Emily in Martin's care. Emily goes back to work and appears to be in a daze from the medication. Her boss notices her throwing up, and tells her that the pills she's taking have done the same to her. At her first session, Emily brings up the undesirable side effects, and talks about her previous attempts at therapy, shortly after Martin was sent away. Afterwards, Banks contacts Emily's previous psychiatrist, Victoria Siebert, who suggests that he put Emily on a new drug called Abelixa. Jonathan declines, telling her he is reluctant to put her on the experimental drug. The next day on her way to work, Emily attempts suicide a second time, by trying to jump onto a subway track, but is stopped by a nearby worker. Hearing of Emily's failed attempt, Jonathan decides to put her on the drug that Siebert recommended and begins to see positive results, enabling Emily to function normally. Some time passes and Emily begins to experience sleepwalking episodes, a side effect of the new drug. One evening, Emily is preparing dinner, and suddenly without a word, she stabs Martin to death, appearing to be sleepwalking. When the police arrive, she tells them that she went to sleep and then woke up to find Martin dead. She's taken to the station, and when Jonathan arrives, he tells them that she is heavily medicated, which makes her version of events plausible. Emily is brought to trial for her husband's murder, and Jonathan fights for her acquittal. Meanwhile, he is criticized publicly for fumbling Emily's case, and his colleagues assume he has been negligent due to his heavy workload. Emily eventually agrees to plead insanity, and is declared not guilty, on the condition that she stays in a mental institution until cleared by a psychiatrist. Due to the case's bad publicity, Jonathan's career is left in ruins. He sets out to clear his name, but what he uncovers instead, is evidence that Emily not only faked her suicide attempts, but was also involved in a conspiracy with Siebert. Jonathan interviews Emily after administering what he claims is a truth serum. Emily begins to behave as if the serum is taking effect, which unbeknownst to her, is actually a placebo of saltwater. This confirms Jonathan's suspicions that Emily has been faking her mental illness the entire time. When Jonathan confronts Siebert with his findings, she mails photographs to his wife, implying he had an affair with Emily, and Jonathan's wife and son leave him. Jonathan manages to turn Emily and Victoria against each other, by using his authority to prevent contact between them, and making each woman believe that the other had sold her out to Jonathan for a better deal. Ready to confess first, Emily reveals the workings of the plot to Jonathan. She enjoyed the opulent lifestyle she had with Martin in Greenwich, Connecticut, and hated him for causing her to lose it all, when he went to jail. She specifically went to Siebert for counseling, as she too, had been abandoned by her husband, and the two became lovers. Emily taught Victoria about the workings of the financial world, while Victoria taught Emily how to fake psychiatric disorders. They then went to elaborate means to fake the side effects of Abelixa in order to manipulate the stock prices of the drug's manufacturer and its competitor, allowing the duo to become rich in the process. In exchange for her confession, Jonathan agrees to release Emily from the psychiatric ward, but will continue to remain under his care. Wearing a wire, she immediately reunites with Victoria, who admits details of the plot to Emily while kissing and caressing her. Victoria is arrested for conspiracy to commit murder, but Emily, due to double jeopardy, can no longer be held criminally responsible for her part in Martin's murder. A short time later, Emily is in Jonathan's office. As retaliation for Emily's part in the plot, Jonathan, who still technically oversees her case, prescribes her a series of unnecessary drugs with serious side effects, threatening to send her back to the ward if she refuses to take them. Furious, Emily rants about all that she has done to avoid being sent to prison for Martin's death. Unknown to her, Martin's mother, her lawyer, and a police officer are all outside the room and hear the confession. The police take Emily into custody and send her back to the mental ward. In the final scene, Jonathan has regained his normal life with his wife and son. Meanwhile, Emily stands, heavily medicated, and is staring blankly out the window. A psychiatric nurse asks Emily how she's feeling, and she responds without emotion, "Better. Much better." The end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a comment down below. For more movie recaps, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. See you next time.